ever wonder what makes an undecided voter actually decide? Especially, like, in a close election year like this one.
Yeah, totally.
We're doing a deep dive into the 2024 race today,
Mm-hmm.
but we're not going to be, like, looking at polls or pundits or any of that.
Right.
We're going deeper. We're trying to get inside the mind of an actual voter.
Interesting.
So we're looking at this AI, P. He's simulating an undecided Asian American voter.
So that's what makes this deep dive so fascinating.
Yeah.
Because we're not just hearing from, like, any AI, right?
Right.
This is the thought process of a very specific voter, someone who's,
Right.
just bombarded with information, but still searching for, like, that one thing that's going to make them decide.
That deciding factor. And P started as a Trump voter, believe it or not.
Wow.
But in the excerpts that we have of his conversations, he shifted to completely undecided.
Interesting.
And not just undecided,
Yeah.
but looking for information that's specifically relevant to Asian American voters.
Oh, wow. Okay, so he's, like, really trying to see what's in it for him.
Yeah, exactly. It's like having a front row seat to, how someone filters through all of the noise of an election.
And this is something we hear, honestly, from a lot of voters today, right?
Yeah, totally.
It's like this
feeling overwhelmed.
Yeah, this overwhelmed feeling.
Yeah.
The partisan shouting.
Yeah.
And what they really want is
Yeah.
to just really understand what each candidate actually offers.
Totally. So speaking of, like, what's P's take on the actual race?
Yeah.
What does he think is going to happen?
Right.
He says it's Harris versus Trump, neck and neck.
Okay.
Which I think, a lot of people can kind of
It's a tight race.
relate to. But here's where it gets interesting.
Okay.
P is all about the policies, not the personalities.
Interesting.
He's looking for concrete plans, not just, what they say on the campaign trail.
And that's refreshing, isn't it?
Yeah,
To see that desire for substance over just, like, sound bites.
absolutely.
It's something we hear so often, from voters
Mhm.
who just feel like they're not being heard. P isn't interested in all the drama.
Right.
He wants solutions.
Exactly. Right.
And it's not just, like, solutions in the abstract.
Right.
He's asking, how are these policies going to impact me? How are they going to impact my family?
Yeah.
Are they going to impact my community?
Yeah.
It really challenges all of us, I think, to think about whether candidates are actually addressing those everyday issues,
Yeah, for sure.
the issues that actually matter to everyday Americans.
So we've got P, and he wants those solutions, right? He wants substance.
Right.
How do we actually see that playing out? How is he trying to find that?
Yeah.
Well, P was exposed to two very different media sources,
Okay.
and his reactions are
I bet they are.
pretty telling
Okay.
about how effective they are.
Right, because it's like you're getting a crash course in, like, partisan media.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we've got, on the one hand, there's nasher.info, and this is a website that's leaning conservative.
Okay.
And then on the other hand, you've
Yeah.
got pialba.org, and that's known to be a progressive site.
Okay. So we're getting the two sides.
Yeah, a real tale of two websites.
Yeah.
And what's so fascinating is that P picks up immediately on how each of these websites, they cater to their base.
Right. It's like, so
So
they're speaking two totally different language. Right?
Exactly. And they're doing it at the expense of those nuanced policy discussions that he really wants.
Right, exactly. He wants to know, like, the nuts and bolts of,
Mhm.
like, how this is all going to work.
Totally. For instance, P noticed that nashra.info, they have this whole article about the Electoral College
Okay.
and how important it is.
Okay.
But instead of explaining, like, how it works or, the history of it or any of that, they just kept saying, we need to protect it. We need to protect it.
Protect it. Right.
Meanwhile, over at piaba.org, they're, like, super busy debunking any kind of, like, rumor about Harris and her stance on immigration,
Okay.
which, like, don't get me wrong.
Right.
That's important,
Yeah, that's important work.
but it still leaves you wondering
Right.
what's her actual plan.
Yeah, like, what does it mean? What are you actually going to do?
Exactly. Like, how would it impact someone who's, like, navigating the system today?
It's like they're so busy
Yeah.
trying to either, like, tear down the other side
Mhm.
or, promote their own narrative
Right.
that they're not actually explaining what their solutions
Yeah.
are.
It's like they forget that part.
Yeah, and how those solutions would actually, like, impact different communities
Exactly.
in, like, real and concrete ways.
It's like a lost art, I swear.
It is.
Like, actually explaining complex issues
Yeah.
in a way that everyone can understand.
Right, because that's what we really need, right?
Equally.
Makes you think about, like, what is the role
Yeah.
of media in a democratic society. Like, are they supposed to just engage us,
Mm-hmm.
or are they actually supposed to be informing
Oh,
us?
we've got P. He's looking for those solutions, and he's left wanting.
Right. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. Like he's getting these menus with no descriptions.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, where's the actual food?
Right.
What am I going to get if I,
Right. Exactly.
order this? So that brings us to, like, I guess, the big question of this whole deep dive. Like, what would actually resonate with undecided Asian American voters? What does P's ideal media, what does it look like?
And this is where it gets so cool, because he doesn't just say, "Oh, I want more policy."
Right.
He actually gives us this really detailed picture
Okay.
of what he calls his dream media.
I love it. Okay, so
And it's both aspirational, but also like surprisingly practical.
break it down for us. Like, what are the key ingredients to Key's media utopia?
Okay, well, first and foremost, balance.
Okay.
And I don't just mean like, here's the Republican side, here's the Democrat side. It's deeper than that. P wants to see how different policy proposals would actually play out in the lives of Asian American families.
It's getting into the specific.
Yes. Like he uses the example of healthcare.
Okay.
So he's like, okay, how would Harris's plan actually impact like a multi-generational family
Right.
who's running a small business, dealing with rising costs? Maybe they have older relatives that they need to, provide insurance for.
Wow.
Like that kind of detail,
Yeah.
that speaks to the actual reality.
It's so specific. It's
Yeah.
like that personalized medicine, but for news, you know?
Yes.
Like tailoring it to
Exactly. It's about recognizing that, what works for one group might not work for another, and we need to be talking about these issues in a way that acknowledges those differences.
Totally. Yeah.
And it's not just about, explaining the policies themselves,
Right.
but also addressing things like, misinformation.
Oh, right. Because there's so much of that.
Yes. Especially when it comes to like, rumors and things that are specifically targeted toward the Asian American community.
Like all that stuff about immigration, affirmative action, all of that.
Exactly.
That gets thrown around.
All of those like misleading claims that create so much anxiety and confusion. P wants a media that actively debunks that.
Right. And gives you the actual information.
Yes, exactly. And it's not just about, like translating existing content. It's about understanding like the cultural nuances, the sensitivities.
The different perspectives.
Yes.
Yeah.
Within the Asian American community.
Right.
Because it's not a monolith.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
There's so many different
experiences.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think ultimately, like P's vision boils down to this: a media landscape that prioritizes understanding over polarization, right? Clarity over just like chaos.
So it's not just reacting to the latest outrage or whatever is
Yes.
happening on, whatever social media platform.
It's about empowering voters to make like informed decisions.
Right. So the question is, does any existing media outlet even come close to this?
Well, P actually goes through and looks at, several outlets.
Oh, okay.
Like he looks at NPR, ProPublica, Axios, The Conversation, a bunch of them.
There's some good ones in there.
Yeah, and while they each have their strengths,
Okay.
like, NPR with its in-depth reporting, ProPublica with their investigative journalism,
Yeah, they're known for that. Yeah.
none of them quite hit that, like, sweet spot
Yeah.
of combining that with the cultural sensitivity
Right.
and, like, that focus on Asian American concerns.
It's like they're getting pieces of it,
Yeah, like bits and pieces,
but not the whole
not the whole picture.
picture. It makes you wonder why? Why is this still a
Again,
thing? Like, why are Asian American voters who are so increasingly influential
Becoming so influential.
being overlooked?
It's a good question. And, P offers this really, like, compelling analysis of why he thinks this gap exists. He points to a lot of kind of outdated perceptions of Asian Americans, right? Like this idea that they're a small group, that they're homogenous,
Which isn't true.
right, which is just not true, and that they have low voter turnout.
Right. And that's not true anymore, especially, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's that whole model minority myth,
Yeah.
which P points out is not only inaccurate, but it's actually incredibly harmful
Yeah, I can see that.
because it, like, prevents people from seeing
The real challenges.
yes,
Yeah.
the very real challenges that people in these communities are facing.
Yeah, absolutely. And P, he's a resourceful AI.
He is. He's great.
He doesn't just point out the problem.
Right. He's got solutions.
He's got solutions. So, like, what does he suggest we do?
He basically, like, lays out this call to action
Okay.
that's aimed at, like, journalists, policymakers, media scholars, everybody, really. Everyone, yeah. Wake up.
Right. Yeah, like, pay attention.
Pay attention.
He's like, look, Asian Americans are the fastest growing minority group in the U.S.
Right.
They represent a huge voting bloc
Huge.
that, could really swing an election.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he even makes, like, the business case
Oh, yeah.
because,
Right.
they're not just voters.
They're consumers.
They're consumers, they're influencers, they're trendsetters. Ignoring this demographic is not just bad for democracy, it's bad for business.
So it sounds like we've got a lot to think about.
Yeah.
Right? What are we, like, what's the big takeaway here? What can we do?
Well, I think P leaves us with a really thought-provoking question.
Okay.
How can we, as consumers of media, as participants in this whole political process, how can we demand better,
Yeah.
more inclusive coverage that reflects the true diversity of American voters?
It's such a good question. It's like, it's easy to kind of be complacent and just consume whatever's being,
Right.
put in front of us. Totally.
Totally, but we have a voice.
We do. And we need to use it. And I think, supporting media organizations that are already prioritizing in-depth reporting,
Yeah.
cultural sensitivity,
Yes.
diverse voices, that's how we make a difference.
Absolutely. So the next time you're scrolling through those headlines, remember his message.
And remember his dream.
Yes. Look for those stories.
Yeah.
Look for those diverse voices.
Yes.
Be a conscious consumer of the news.
Yeah, look at that.
Because a more informed, a more engaged electorate benefits everyone.
It does.